The Galactic Council had been meeting for 6 cycles straight, which for those keeping track is about 3 of your Earth weeks. Now, I've been observing your species for quite some time, and let me tell you, the bureaucratic tedium of a multi-species governance body makes your United Nations look like a thrilling action sequence. But this particular session, this one was about to get interesting. Commander Thexerel of the Vorentine Fleet, a being who looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a particularly judgmental librarian, was presenting his proposal to the assembled delegates. The subject, humanity's petition for protected species status. And if you're wondering why that matters, well, let me paint you a picture. Humans had been discovered approximately 47 cycles ago, which in your reckoning is about 9 years. In that time, you'd gone from bewildered primitives staring at first contact ships to, well, still bewildered. But now you had questions. Lots of questions. Uncomfortable questions about why the Galactic Council allowed certain practices that humans found, shall we say, ethically problematic. The vast assembly hall was filled with representatives from over 200 species. You had the aquatic Denarians in their water-filled hoverpods, the the silicon-based Chorix who communicated through light pulses, and the Cherugians who honestly just looked like very angry badgers in business attire. The diversity was impressive, I'll grant you that. What wasn't impressive was their unanimous dismissal of humanity's petition. The humans, Thexerel clicked, his mandibles twitching in what passed for a sneer among his kind, claim that their removal from their home world for labor purposes constitutes a violation of sentient rights. However, as the Council is well aware, humanity lacks the technological threshold for protected status. They possess no faster-than-light capability, they have no planetary defense grid, and most critically, their population density makes them expendable. That last word hung in the air like a bad smell, which, considering the Cherugian delegate Gornix had just released, what I can only assume was a stress pheromone, was saying something. Ambassador Keiko Tanaka, one of only 3 human representatives allowed to observe the proceedings, stood from her seat in the petitioner's gallery. She was small by most species standards, barely clearing 5 feet in your measurements, with gray streaking through her black hair and eyes that had seen far too much for someone in her 50s. But here's the thing about Keiko. She didn't back down. Ever. With respect, Commander, she said, her voice cutting through the multilingual translation matrix like a laser through butter. The technological threshold is an arbitrary metric that conveniently allows the Council's more powerful members to exploit those deemed lesser. My people have every right. Your people, interrupted Councillor Vraxis, a Helian whose species resembled nothing so much as an octopus that had been stretched vertically and given too much coffee, have been compensated fairly for their labor. The mining colonies on Kepler 432b, the agricultural settlements on Proxima Centauri C, these ventures provide employment and opportunity for millions of humans. Would you prefer they remain on Earth, squabbling over dwindling resources? Oh, the audacity! See, here's what Vraxis wasn't mentioning. Those employment opportunities involved 12-hour shifts in environments that would make your worst factory farms look like luxury resorts. Humans were being scattered across dozens of systems, doing the jobs that other species found too dangerous, too degrading, or too boring. And why humans? Because you breed fast, adapt faster, and here's the kicker. You don't have anyone with enough firepower to complain about it. Keiko's jaw tightened, and I could see her running calculations behind those sharp eyes. She knew the game was rigged. She'd known it from the moment Earth made contact. But she'd been playing anyway, documenting every abuse, every violation, building a case that might mean something if anyone with power actually cared. The conditions on these colonies, Keiko continued, pulling up a holoscreen that displayed images even I found disturbing, violate every standard of sentient treatment that this council claims to uphold. Humans working 16-hour days in toxic atmospheres without proper equipment, children as young as 8 assigned to sorting facilities. And when workers protest or attempt to organize, they simply disappear. The assembly hall erupted in a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and what I'm fairly certain was interpretive dancing from the Melodian delegation. Thexerail's mandibles clacked in irritation. Unsubstantiated allegations, he hissed. The Council has investigated these claims and found no evidence of, because the Council's investigators are inevitably from the same corporations running the colonies. Keiko shot back. You're asking us to trust the accused to investigate themselves. It was then that I noticed the figure standing at the back of the human delegation. His name was Vince Laurent, though most people called him Vince. And he was, well, let's just say he was the reason I'm telling you this story. Mid-30s, average height for a human male, with the kind of face that wouldn't stand out in a crowd. Brown eyes, dark hair kept military short, and hands that bore the calluses of someone who'd done real work. Vince wasn't supposed to be there. He was a mining engineer from one of the Kepler colonies, someone who'd worked his way up from sorting facilities as a teenager to become one of the few humans with actual technical expertise in off-world extraction. He'd been smuggled to Earth by sympathetic Denarians, those aquatic folks I mentioned earlier who'd grown uncomfortable with what they were witnessing in the outer colonies. While Keiko argued, Vince was doing something far more interesting. He was watching, not the Council, not the delegates, but the data streams. You see, every species in that hall was connected to the Council's central network, sharing information, coordinating responses, and here's where it gets fun, leaving their systems hilariously vulnerable to someone who knew what they were looking for. Humans might not have faster-than-light travel, but you developed something that the Council, in their technological superiority, had somehow overlooked. You'd gotten really, really good at breaking into computer systems. Thexerail was moving to call for a vote on humanity's petition, a vote that everyone knew would fail spectacularly, when every holoscreen in the assembly hall suddenly flickered. The Vorentine commander paused, his mandibles twitching in confusion, as his carefully prepared presentation was replaced by something else entirely. Financial records, shipping manifests, communications logs, all of it streaming across hundreds of displays in real time, and all of it showing the same thing, a systematic, coordinated effort by three of the Council's most powerful factions to exploit human labor while suppressing Earth's technological development. The Helion Corporation, Raxus's people, had been deliberately withholding fusion technology that could have solved Earth's energy crisis. The Vorentine fleet had been intercepting human ships attempting to develop their own FTL drives, destroying them and calling it unfortunate accidents, and the Terugian Mining Consortium. Well, they'd been working with Earth's own corrupt governments to ensure a steady supply of desperate workers who had no choice but to accept off-world contracts. But here's where it got really interesting. The data dump also revealed something else. Hidden among the financial records was evidence of a systematic genocide. Remember those workers who disappeared when they protested? They weren't disappeared, they were killed. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. And their deaths were being covered up by the very council members who were currently pretending to be shocked by Keiko's unsubstantiated allegations. The assembly hall descended into chaos. Delegates were shouting in hundreds of languages. The Denarians were literally bubbling with rage, and Gornix the Terugian was making a run for the exit, only to find that the hall's security protocols had somehow locked all the doors. Vince, still standing at the back of the human delegation, allowed himself the smallest smile. You see, breaking into the Council's network had been the easy part. The hard part had been making sure that once he was in, every species in the galaxy would see what he'd found. The data wasn't just being broadcast in the assembly hall, it was being transmitted across the entire Council network, reaching millions of worlds simultaneously. There's a saying among you humans, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Vince had just turned every spotlight in the galaxy on the Council's darkest secrets. Thexerail was attempting to regain control, his mandibles clicking so rapidly they sounded like machine gun fire. This is clearly a fabrication, a desperate attempt by the humans to show you exactly what you've been doing, Keiko interrupted. And now she was smiling too. That terrifying smile that humans get when they're done playing nice and ready to burn everything down. You wanted to know what makes humanity special, Commander? What makes us worth protecting? Let me tell you, We don't forget. We don't forgive. And we sure as hell don't stop fighting. The Melodian delegate, a species that communicated through interpretive dance, remember suddenly performed what I can only describe as the galactic equivalent of a mic drop. Apparently, even they were fed up with the Council's corruption. It was Counselor Ciris of the Denarians who spoke next, her translated voice carrying across the now silent hall. The aquatic species had always been neutral, observers rather than participants in Council politics. But even they had their limits. The Denarian Collective moves to grant humanity immediate protected species status, she announced, her water-filled pod pulsing with what I recognized as determination. Furthermore, we move to initiate a full investigation into the practices revealed in these documents, with oversight from species not implicated in the data. Second, came a voice from the Querix delegation, their light pulses translating to something that sounded suspiciously like barely controlled fury. Thexeril's mandibles stopped clicking. Vrax's had gone very still, his tentacles wrapped tight around his hover seat. And Gornix? Well, Gornix was still trying to gnaw through the door. The vote, when it came, was not what anyone expected. Humanity's petition for protected status passed with a 73% majority. The investigation into Council corruption was approved unanimously, minus, of course, the votes from those who were currently trying to delete the evidence from their own systems. Spoiler alert, Vince had made sure that was impossible. But here's the thing about humans that I've learned in my years of observation. You're not satisfied with just winning. No. You have to make sure everyone knows they lost. Keiko walked down from the petitioner's gallery to the floor of the assembly hall, her small frame somehow commanding more presence than beings 3 times her size. She stopped directly in front of Thexeriel, looked up at the towering Vorentine, and said just loud enough for the translation matrix to pick up, "You thought one human didn't matter. You thought Vince over there." She gestured back to where the engineer stood, still smiling that dangerous smile, "was just another worker you could ignore. But here's what you failed to understand about my species, Commander. We're pack animals. You hurt one of us. You answer to all of us." The aftermath of what became known as the data liberation, because humans love giving dramatic names to things, was far more entertaining than anyone expected. Within hours of Vince's little technological magic trick, protests erupted on 73 different worlds, not just human protests, mind you, but multi-species demonstrations demanding accountability from the Council. The Denarians, bless their aquatic hearts, opened their systems completely to independent auditors. The Melodians performed what I can only describe as an interpretive dance of righteous fury that went viral across 17 systems. Even the Querix, who typically couldn't care less about biological species politics, started pulsing angry light patterns at Vorentine ships. But you want to know what happened to our key players, don't you? Well, buckle up. Thexeriel attempted to flee the assembly hall the moment the doors unsealed, which, and I cannot stress this enough, was the worst possible decision he could have made. You see, the Vorentine fleet had been running a little side operation that involved not just exploiting humans, but also skimming profits from legitimate Council military contracts. The kind of profits that paid for personal estates on Paradise worlds while fleet personnel went without proper equipment. His own officers arrested him 3 cycles later. Last I heard, he's working in a Denarian prison facility, teaching young aquatic students about the importance of ethical leadership. The irony is delicious. Rax's proved more slippery. The Helion Corporation had layers upon layers of legal protection, subsidiaries within subsidiaries, enough corporate structures to make your human lawyers weep with envy. But here's what Rax's hadn't counted on. Humans are terrifyingly persistent when it comes to tracking money. A financial analyst named Patricia Okonkwo, late 30s, Nigerian, with a mind like a steel trap and a personality that made tax auditors look warm and fuzzy, spent the next 6 months tracing every credit, every transaction, every shell company in the Helion network. She found 17 separate accounts where Vraxes had been siphoning funds meant for technological development aid to less advanced species, including, and this is my favorite part, the funds that were supposed to help Earth develop sustainable fusion power. The Helion board of directors asked for Vraxes's resignation. When he refused, Patricia released her findings to the galactic press. The board then asked again, but with significantly more hostile tentacles. Vraxes is currently teaching economics at a minor university on the Outer Rim, and I'm told he's absolutely miserable. Good. Gornix? Oh, Gornix tried to cut a deal. See, the Terugian Mining Consortium was the smallest of the three corrupt factions, which meant Gornix thought he could trade information for immunity. What he didn't realize was that humans had already extracted every piece of data from the Council network. His testimony was redundant. He's currently working in, wait for it, a human-run mining cooperative on one of Jupiter's moons. 12-hour shifts, just like the humans he'd helped exploit. The workers there call him Gary and make him attend all the union meetings. I'm told he's learned a lot about worker solidarity, whether he wanted to or not. But you're probably wondering about Vince and Keiko, aren't you? Here's where the story gets interesting in a different way. Vince Laurent didn't become a hero in the traditional sense. He didn't want parades or medals or his face on recruitment posters. What he wanted was to go back to work, but this time on humanity's terms. Within a year of the data liberation, he was leading Earth's first independent deep space mining operation. No corporate oversight, no council interference, just humans and a handful of allied species working together to extract resources from asteroid belts that other civilizations had deemed too dangerous or unprofitable. The operation was wildly successful, partly because humans turned out to be excellent at high-risk mining. Surprise, surprise, and partly because Vince had a gift for engineering solutions that other species hadn't considered. Like using controlled explosions to break up asteroids, a technique that made every safety inspector in the council clutch their whatever they had instead of pearls in horror, right up until they saw the efficiency rates. I visited one of his facilities about 8 months ago. The man was covered in rock dust, arguing with a Denarian engineer about the optimal placement of thermal charges, and looking happier than I'd ever seen him. When I asked him if he regretted his actions, risking everything to expose the council, he just laughed. Regret, he said, wiping grease off his hands with a rag that had seen better days. I regret not doing it sooner. I regret every day I stayed quiet while people I knew disappeared. I regret believing the lie that we were too small to matter. Then he paused, looked up at the asteroid they were currently hollowing out, and added, "But I don't regret breaking their system. Someone had to. Might as well have been me." That's the thing about humans that still catches other species off guard. You have this bizarre mixture of pragmatism and idealism that shouldn't work, but somehow does. Vince wasn't motivated by glory or revenge. He was motivated by the simple belief that people shouldn't be exploited. And when he had the tools to do something about it, he did. Keiko, on the other hand, became exactly the kind of hero that makes politicians nervous. She was appointed Earth's first full ambassador to the Galactic Council, with actual authority this time, not just observer status. And she used that authority like a surgical laser. Within 2 years, she'd pushed through 17 separate reforms to council labor practices. She established the first multi-species workers' rights organization, which currently represents over 4 billion beings across 32 systems. She personally led the investigation into the disappearances of human workers, and when she found evidence of mass graves on 3 different worlds, she didn't just report it. She made sure every news outlet in the galaxy covered the story for weeks. The beings responsible for those deaths are currently serving life sentences in facilities that make maximum security human prisons look comfortable. Keiko made sure of it. But perhaps her greatest achievement was something simpler. She established a fund using reparations from the Helion Corporation, the Vorentine Fleet, and the Terugian Mining Consortium to send human children to advanced schools across the galaxy, not as charity cases or curiosities, but as legitimate students with full rights and protections. One of those students was a girl named Amara Chen, whose parents had died in a mining accident on Kepler 42b. Amara was 13 when Keiko's reforms went through, angry and grieving and convinced that the galaxy didn't care about people like her. Today, she's one of the leading quantum engineers in the Council's research division, developing the faster-than-light technology that humanity had been denied for so long. I asked Keiko once, during a rare moment when she wasn't terrifying some council member into doing the right thing, whether she thought the fight was worth it. She gave me a look that could have melted hull plating. My grandfather was an activist during Earth's civil rights movement, she said. He used to tell me that the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. The problem is, it doesn't bend on its own. Someone has to grab it and pull. She paused, then smiled. Vince pulled. I'm just making sure it stays bent in the right direction. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is the part where I tell you everything worked out perfectly. Humanity ascended to become a major galactic power, and everyone lived happily ever after, right? Wrong. The truth is messier. Earth still struggles with internal divisions. The Council still has corrupt members. We just got rid of the most egregious ones. Humans are still doing dangerous jobs across the galaxy, though now they have actual protections and fair compensation. Progress, as you humans like to say, is a marathon, not a sprint. But here's what changed. Humans stopped being invisible. You became a species that other beings had to take seriously, not because you had the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons, but because you'd proven something that the galaxy had forgotten. One person, acting with courage and conviction, can change everything. Vince Laurent was supposed to be nobody. A mining engineer from a backwater colony on a backwater world, working in a system designed to grind people like him into dust. He should have been powerless, insignificant, easy to ignore. Instead, he became the catalyst for the biggest political upheaval in Council history, not through violence or military might, but through information, through the simple act of showing everyone exactly what was happening in the shadows. The Galactic Council has a new saying now, one that's spread across hundreds of worlds in dozens of languages. When someone in power suggests exploiting a weaker species, when corporations talk about acceptable losses, when anyone argues that individual beings don't matter in the grand scheme of things, someone inevitably responds with remember the Laurent Protocol. That's what they call it. Vince's act of digital rebellion has been enshrined in Council law as the Laurent Protocol, the legal framework protecting whistleblowers and guaranteeing that all data about species treatment must be publicly accessible. Any attempt to hide evidence of exploitation now carries severe penalties, and any species under Council jurisdiction has the right to access information about how their people are being treated. The protocol has been invoked 47 times since its implementation. Each time, it's revealed practices that powerful entities wanted to keep hidden. Each time, reforms followed. The galaxy isn't perfect, but it's better than it was. I saw Vince and Keiko together once, about 3 years after the data liberation. It was at a memorial service for the workers who died in the colonies, the ones whose deaths had been covered up for so long. Thousands of humans and their allied species had gathered to remember and to promise that such things would never happen again. Vince was standing off to the side, uncomfortable with the attention, as always. Keiko approached him, and I was close enough to hear their conversation. They want to name a station after you, Keiko said. The new deep space facility near Proxima Centauri. Vince shook his head. Name it after someone who deserves it. One of the workers who died. Someone who actually suffered. You suffered, Keiko said quietly. You worked those same facilities. Lost friends to the same accidents that weren't really accidents. The difference is, you survived long enough to do something about it. I just pushed some buttons, Vince replied, with that frustrating human tendency toward self-deprecation. You're the one who turned it into real change. Keiko smiled. We make a good team then. You break the systems, I rebuild them into something better. They stood there in silence for a moment, watching as speakers shared memories of loved ones who died in the colonies. Finally, Vince spoke again. Do you think it's enough? He asked. What we did? What we're still doing? Is it enough to make up for all those years? Keiko considered the question seriously. No, she said. But it's a start. And sometimes, a start is all you can ask for. That's the thing about humans that I've come to understand after all these years of observation. You're not perfect. You're often messy and contradictory and frustratingly stubborn. You make mistakes. You hurt each other. You struggle with the same petty jealousies and fears as every other species in the galaxy. But you also have this incredible capacity for growth, for recognizing injustice and refusing to accept it, for believing that individuals matter, even when all the evidence suggests they don't, for looking at systems that have existed for thousands of years and saying, "This is wrong and we're going to change it." The Galactic Council thought one human didn't matter. They thought they could exploit your species with impunity because you were technologically inferior. They thought you'd accept your place in their carefully ordered hierarchy. They were wrong. They were so catastrophically, hilariously, beautifully wrong, because it only took one human, one mining engineer with access to a computer system and the courage to use it, to bring down their house of cards. And behind that one human stood millions more, ready to support him, ready to fight, ready to rebuild the galaxy into something better. So here's my advice to anyone in the universe thinking about underestimating humanity. Don't, because every time you dismiss a human as insignificant, every time you assume they'll accept injustice quietly, every time you think one person can't possibly matter in the grand scheme of things, remember Vince Laurent. Remember the mining engineer who became the most wanted hacker in Council history. Remember Keiko Tanaka, who turned a data dump into a revolution. Remember Patricia Okonkwo, who tracked every stolen credit across 17 systems. Remember Amara Chen, who turned her grief into genius. Remember that humanity doesn't measure significance by size or strength or technological advancement. You measure it by impact, by the changes a person makes, the lives they touch, the systems they improve. One human didn't matter, the Council said. One human brought them to their knees, and honestly, I can't think of anything more human than that.